And these are two monuments that usually people, especially if they're not guided, they just walk by. They don't pay any attention to them. They focus on the columns of the temple, but they don't know they have bypassed one of the most important monuments of ancient Greek history.
That's amazing. Wow, I need to go back to Delphi, and I need to take you with me.
Yeah.
Are you ready for a truly insider's guide on where to travel in Greece for the best archaeological sites, hidden gems, and even the unknown must-sees at the most popular places? Grab a pen and paper and get ready to make notes for your dream holiday. As today, I'm talking with Aristotle Koskaninas, archaeologist and tourist guide. With 20 years in the field and hundreds of sites under his belt, there isn't much Aristotle doesn't know about where to go in Greece. Hello, this is Anya Leonard, founder and director of Classical Wisdom, a site dedicated to bringing ancient wisdom to modern minds. You can now find us along with our free newsletter at classicalwisdom.substack.com. And before we begin, a quick thank you to our society members who make this podcast possible. If you would like to become a member and help support the classics, just go to our website, classicalwisdom.substack.com, and subscribe. You can also help us out by subscribing to our podcast channel. Just hit that red button, subscribe, to get your monthly dose of the classics. Now, on to ancient Olympia, Naxos, and Delphi.
First off, you have such a great name. That you go by Aristotle. I think everybody loves that. It seems like you were destined to be involved in the ancient world. But was that what got you interested in archaeology in the first place?
No, actually, I have to thank my great-great-grandfather for the name Aristotle, because sometime in the 18th century, someone in the family chose to add this name in the family. But I can't say that it was the name that gave me the impetus to study archaeology. Initially, I wanted to become, and you may laugh, I wanted to become an army officer. I wanted to go career military. But in Greece, to get into the military academy, you have to be very good in physics, chemistry, and mathematics. And I'm terrible in all of them. So I switched to my second lab, which was history and archaeology. And I said that when I was in high school, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. And not history, because history you have to we have to read ancient texts and sources, inscriptions. For me, that was a little boring, or at least that's what I thought back then when I was a teenager. Participating in excavations, exploring things, finding things for the first time, taking up from the ground. For me, that was thrilling and fascinating. Maybe Indiana Jones helped in that. Although he's not an archaeologist. Now I know that he's not an archaeologist, but that was the one of the reasons. And the other reason is that I was born in Athens, and history and archaeology are everywhere in this city. You just get out of your balcony, you can see the Acropolis in the distance. You walk by a random park and you see ancient columns, and there is the remains of a Roman building and a mosaic, which is just visible just behind the fence. So there's a lot of influences.
So you've been traveling around the Mediterranean and exploring all these archaeological sites and guiding people. I mean, you've got a wealth of experience. How long have you been doing this for?
I became a guide in 2003. Yeah, before that I was working for the Ministry of Culture as an archaeologist, which is relevant, but at the same time it's completely different. Because as an archaeologist, you have to focus on a particular site or sites. You have also to focus on a specific period. As a guide, you have to approach things from a more holistic perspective. You have to know actually a lot of things about all the periods of the areas that you're going to guide.
Yeah, because there's so much layers of history and just about everywhere in Greece. So I can imagine you have to be on the ready, have a much larger overview.
Yeah, from the Paleolithic period, I would say about 100,000 BP before present, because that's the correct date for the Paleolithic period, all the way to 19th century.
Wow.
Because I mean, I'll give you just an example. You go to the island of Naxos, and at the island of Naxos, you have recently they're excavating a very important Paleolithic site. It's not visible. I mean, you cannot visit it, but it's there, so you have to talk about it. You have the early Bronze Age with the Cycladic figurines. Then you have the classical period, Middle Ages, Venetians, Ottomans. Well, in a small business, much smaller factor the Ottomans played in the history of Naxos, but you have to be able to present all these historical horizons and their culture.
That's amazing. So in these last 20 years, how many islands do you think you've been to? Or archaeological sites?
Archaeological sites. Well, to be honest, well, I just tell you that, first of all, there are hundreds of archaeological sites and museums in Greece, which are controlled and ticketed archaeological sites, and then we have thousands of other archaeological sites which are have been designated, but they're not part of itineraries, or people cannot visit them. When I was in the School of Tourist Guides, we had 100 days of field trips, and we visited all of Greece. So yeah, I would say that I have visited. Well, I cannot give you an exact number because off the top of my head, but I would say a couple of hundred sites.
So which would you say are some of your favorites, the must-see, the bucket list?
Favorite and must-see is a little different. So I will start with with ancient Olympia, which it's also one of the most famous archaeological sites in Greece. And I like Olympia because it is associated with the history of the Olympic Games and the spirit of the ancient Olympics, which was a little different than the spirit of the modern Olympics. And this is a place where you can see how all the Greeks would come together and they would compete. So you have their antagonism, but not in war, but in sports, and how they were trying to prove that they could excel above everybody else through their prowess in sports, and also through art and culture, because also they would dedicate statues, fine pottery, bronze artifacts, which were produced created in their own city-states. So Olympia was one of these places where the differences and the similarities of the Greeks were highlighted. And of course, you have all these anecdotes about the achievements of the ancient athletes, which for me are very interesting.
Yeah, there's so many wonderful stories about, one of the guy's sons both win the Olympics and then he dies, or I can't remember some of them off the top of my head, but you've got like a really excellent anecdote.
Yeah. There are anecdotes that how can I put it? They can teach us a lot about the mentality of the athletes and how they were thinking, but also the mentality of the people who were making and they were consuming those stories, because some of these stories probably are just legends. There are stories that people were narrating over a cup of wine in the symposium, and that didn't really happen. But you can learn a lot of things about the ancient Greek mentality when you talk about these stories.
So pretend right now you're in ancient Olympia and you've got a group with you. Where would you take them that they wouldn't know on the archaeological site that would be like a interesting find?
Interesting find. So look, usually my itinerary, because that's actually what I'm trying to do in every archaeological site, is to approach the archaeological site as an area that was used, not as a group of buildings and monuments. Because okay, you can describe the building, but what was going on in the building during the games is important. So sometimes I don't follow the standard itinerary, especially if I have time. So I'll go through the gymnasium, the palestra, which is very impressive building. The palestra was the area where the boxers and the wrestlers were training. We also visit the workshop of Phidias. Phidias was the ancient Athenian sculptor who created the gold and ivory statue of Zeus, one of the wonders of the ancient world. And we think that we have found the workshop where that statue was created.
Oh, amazing.
But apart from, yes, also in the excavations, they have found a wine mug with a inscription engraved on the base, which reads, "I belong to Phidias." It was the wine mug of Phidias. So having something like that is something thrilling. But I also visit the monuments that are more or less off the beaten track, like the Roman baths, which are very well preserved. And there were a lot of Roman period buildings in Olympia, usually, well, they're away from the main visited area, or people don't know about them. But they're first of all very impressive, but also it's a marker of how important Olympia was even in the Roman period, because when you have all these baths and accommodation infrastructure, it meant that people from all around the Roman Empire were going to Olympia to attend the games and even participate in the games.
It's wonderful, again, to see that kind of history in one place and get this sense of time passing. And all the generations living there, experiencing this one place.
Yeah, especially if you could, if you are able to tell the difference between the dates of the different buildings, you can see how the site was developed, when a building was got out of use, or it was repaired and changed its function. For example, there is in Olympia, there is a building called the Leonideon, which was built in the 4th century BC as the hostel, as the guest house for the very prominent delegations or athletes. And then in the Roman period, it was remodeled into the residence of the Roman emperor when he was visiting Olympia. So similar function, but at the same time different, because initially it was used as a public guest house, and then the Roman period was used only for one person and his retinue, which of course tells a lot about how history changed and the political situation had changed in Greece at that time.
Yeah, that's a wonderful insight, that how we can learn so much of the time period and the cultures by seeing how these same buildings were used. Okay, so let's go through another archaeological site for a second, if I may. Pick your brain. One of my favorites is Delphi, and I think it's another one that has such significance in the ancient world. What are some of the spots in that one that people would get like a whole new understanding of ancient Greek culture?
Of ancient Greek culture. So the both known and unknown, or both, or if you
let's
want.
Do both.
Okay, so let's say some of the monuments that are visible and enhanced. For example, the treasury of the Athenians. Treasuries were buildings constructed by the city-states, were in the sanctuary, and they would function as repositories of valuable offerings. And in Delphi, we have actually the largest number of these buildings from any other ancient Greek sanctuary, including Olympia. And you can see the different architectural styles from different Greek regions. So you can see how proud they were of their cultural diversity and their sovereignty. And the treasury of the Athenians has been reconstructed. So you don't see just the foundations, but you can see the entire building, and you can understand much better how those buildings would look like, how they would function, and also how the Athenians would use this building to make statements about their political life and their own achievements, because we believe that it was constructed after the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, and the idea was to celebrate the victory, and Delphi was one of the best places to commemorate military victories, because of course you would get an oracle from Apollo, which would help you in winning the battle. At the same time, Delphi was the center of the Greek world, so everybody who mattered would have seen those monuments or understand what was the significance of Athens or another Greek city-state at that time. so that's one of the features that you can see, but and sometimes we just talk about it as just a treasury, but it's not only a treasury, it's also a monument of the Athenian military victory. And then there is another monument which is very impressive, the engineering feature of the sanctuary. It's a retaining wall built in the 6th century BC with a very interesting polygonal masonry, and in its own right, it's a very impressive site. It's the engineering skills of the Greeks in this period. But what's even more interesting for me are the around 800 inscriptions which are engraved on the blocks of this wall. Inscriptions which were engraved starting in the 3rd century BC all the way to the 2nd century CE, and they contain emancipation inscriptions. So we can see how the people of Delphi, sometimes scholars can see members of the same family after a generation or two, how they were dealing with slavery and how they would free their slaves. Of course, they were being compensated financially to do that. And for me, just that they were using that massive wall as a public notice board or as a kind of repository of contracts and deeds is important for the function of the sanctuary, not only as an area where you go to pray to the gods and to learn about or get a consultation about your future, but also as a place where statements and documents could be displayed.
Wow, it's like an ancient blockchain.
Yeah, it is. It is. And last but not least, there are because there are two monuments which are directly related to the Persian Wars. One, it's a statue base of Apollo. It was dedicated in the early 5th century, immediately after the end of the Persian invasion of 480 BC. And we know there was supporting the statue of Apollo that was quite tall, about 6 meters. I don't know what that in feet is. What? Anyway, do the conversion.
12, 15, yeah.
Yeah, I told you with mathematics, if I was good at mathematics, I would be a colonel in the Greek army. So, according to the French archaeologist excavating at Delphi, the name of the dedicator is the name of Hellenes, the Greeks. So this must be the first dedication that made by the Greeks collectively, not as Athenians, Spartans, Corinthians, but as the Greeks. And for me, that's fascinating because you can say that there was that notion of a common cultural and even national identity that the Greeks would have had, even at the period when they were at each other's throats because of the confrontation of the different Greek city-states. And very close to that base, there is another even more important monument. We know that after the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC, the 31 Greek city-states who fought against the Persians dedicated a golden tripod supported on a column modeled like 3 snakes intertwined. So we know where the monument is because we have found its base, and the serpent column of Plataea is still preserved, but it is in Istanbul. And recently they have placed a reproduction of the serpent column. So having those monuments which are directly related to the Persian wars and the defense of the Greeks, for me, of course, I'm interested in military history, but also it's very important for the history of Greece and the significance of Delphi itself as the oracle which was consulting the Greeks about helping them taking important decisions, both political and or religious. And these are two monuments that usually people, especially if they're not guided, they just walk by. They don't pay any attention to them. They focus on the columns of the temple, but they don't know they have bypassed one of the most important monuments of ancient Greek history.
That's amazing. Wow, I need to go back to Delphi, and I need to take you with me.
Yeah.
So you're saying about your interest in military history. Is there a battlefield that you think is a must-see?
That's a hard one. So it's a hard one because I cannot distinguish between, because all the battlefields that we can identify are important, but I would I would say that the battlefield of Plataea is a place that somebody has to visit. Is not as famous as the Battle of Thermopylae.
Yeah.
Because 300 Leonidas and the 300 Spartans, it has its own legend. But Plataea is the place where you can see the battlefield, and it hasn't changed a lot the last 2,500 years. And if we are right, we can even trace the different locations that are described by Herodotus as the locations where the different battles, because it's not just a battle, it's a campaign that lasted 3 weeks. And we can identify where the Athenians were standing, where they had the first confrontation with the Persian cavalry, and then a few kilometers away, there is a hill where the Greek army moved during the second stage of the battle. So yeah, I think that Plataea is a site that somebody has to include in an itinerary. It is also very convenient because it's very close to Leuctra, where the Thebans defeated the Spartans in 371 BC.
Mm-hmm.
And then if somebody is really interested, just I think 20 kilometers away is Cheroneia, where Philip II defeated the Greek city-states alliance in 338. So you have 3 very important battlefields, which were turning points in the history of Greece. In a relatively small region of the country, they are very well preserved as battlefields. Plus that, I have another personal attachment to Plataea because I'm doing historical reenactment, and this year we had a major event in Plataea, and we're organizing another one in 2024. So I have walked through the battlefield several times.
Well, I can imagine for archaeological sites, there's sort of a dual factor of the importance of the site, but also how well preserved it is and what you can see there. So, I mean, I've been to Thermopylae, and you've got like a little monument and a statue, but there's not. I mean, even the geographical layout has changed so much since the battle that it's kind of hard to get the feel for it.
Thermopylae. Now, what's the thing about Thermopylae? Until recently, we believed, including me, that the battlefield where Leonidas and his 300 fought was buried under several meters of silt. And as you said, the landscape has changed dramatically. It's not the narrow passage where the Spartans and the Persians fought. Now it's plain 5 kilometers wide.
Yeah, but, not exciting.
Yeah, but that was actually, and I was really surprised when a friend of mine, who's also a historical reenactor, studied the battlefield more carefully. And he discovered that the location where the battle took place is there. It's not buried. It's actually, because it is associated with a specific topographic feature, a wall that was built by the people of Phokis to block the road, and that wall is preserved. And Herodotus is clear that the battle was taking place very close to that wall. So the wall is there, it is known. It was known because it was excavated in the 30s, but all the reconstruction of the battle would forget it completely, and they would say, the wall is somewhere in the plain and it was buried. So now, and I learned that recently. And since then, whenever I'm going to Thermopylae, I'm presenting the battle now under this new light. For me, that was thrilling. It was an eye-opener. All these years, I was describing the battle the completely wrong way, and all of a sudden, well, there it is. Yeah, everything ties in, and you have the wall, you have the road, you have the area where the Spartans camped, you have the hill where they had their last stand. So even Thermopylae now, we know that we have discovered that the battlefield is there. So
how far away is that from the monument?
The monument where you have that was built in the 50s it's just across the street. It's very close to the hill where the Spartans had their last stand, and where there is the inscription with the funeral epigram. There is a path. There is even a sign pointing to the wall of the Phocians. And that for me, it was a surprise, because I knew there was a wall. The sign was there, And then all the scholarship about the Battle of Thermopylae was placing the battle close to where the monument is, but we thought that that location had been buried. But now it seems that the battlefield was over there all this time, in front of our eyes, and for some reason we couldn't see it, or we hadn't connected the archaeology with the account of the battle in the correct way. It's very close. When you stand, where is the monument of Leonidas? And when you turn around, having your back to the monument, you can see the hill in front of you.
Ah, cool. Definitely going back there also. I'm making my own itinerary here, so thank you. But one of the things I love about going to archaeological sites, I love going to the most important ones and the popular ones, but every now and then you stumble on one that not many people go to, and it's empty, and you get to just feel like you're there. I mean, one of my favorite experiences was when I was in Butrint in Albania, and there was nobody there. We had the whole place to ourselves. It was like we could envision exactly what everything was and where Augustus walked, and it was so exciting. Now, of course, in Greece, it's tricky because people go to Greece to find these archaeological sites. But are there some hidden gems that you go there and you got the place to yourself, and it's beautiful?
Look, there is a site in. There are a couple of sites. First of all, very close to Athens, such as the sanctuary of Amphiaraos. Amphiaraos was a prophet and a physician. So his sanctuary was both an oracle and a sanctuary of healing. It's located. I mean, you can get there. It's just an hour away driving from Athens. It's not. Its location is strange. It's not on a hill. It's actually in a river valley. So, and it's surrounded by pine trees. And there is a temple, the portico where the patients were sleeping. There's a bath. And for me, that is that's actually of my favorite sites. I visit it every year. It also helps that I have property nearby, so for me it's easy to go there. But and that's a place where you rarely see people, and if you see people, they're not bus loads just going through. It even has a small ancient theater. So that's one of the hidden gems of Attica. And there is another location again in Attica. There was the ancient town of Rhamnous on the northeastern frontiers of Attica, the ancient city-state of Athens. It has a small sanctuary dedicated to the goddess Nemesis, but it also has the remains of an ancient settlement. And you walk, for about 10-15 minutes, you walk by the ancient cemetery and you see the walls, the houses. And again, it's, I went recently in August, and I have been there, as an archaeologist, I have been there several times to look at the site. But as a guide, I have been there only twice, because people don't know about it, and both times there were people who have read about it. We want to see Rhamnous, and I think that's also because it's something different. You see a countryside sanctuary, and you see a countryside settlement of Athens. And for me, another gem, which is known but people don't visit it a lot, is the ancient city of Messini, not to be confused with Mycenae. Messini is in the Peloponnese, and it was a city that was established in the late 4th century BC, and is a very good example of a Hellenistic period city. It has been very well excavated and restored, so it's both interesting and impressive. I'll give an example. There is the stadium. It's a combination of a stadium, gymnasium, palestra. It is surrounded by colonnades, so it's something very impressive. And usually people bypass it, or they go straight to other more famous monuments of the sites of the Peloponnese, and they don't take the time to go to Messini. And I think that's a bit because it's a very important and impressive site.
Oh, I definitely want to go there. One that I enjoyed that was kind of a little bit less known, I think. I mean, everybody knows about it, but not many people go, is outside of Thessaloniki, going to the tombs of Philip II.
Yeah.
And it's just cool because, you know, you just go to these mounds and deep into the earth. And I mean, I don't know if they know it's Philip II, but.
There is a debate. There's still a debate about it. Personally, I was on the fence until a few years ago. But now I think I'm persuaded that it is the right date to be the tomb of Philip II. Because it has to do, a friend of mine who told me that the pottery that they found in the tomb is very similar to a pottery that was standing from a cemetery that he excavated, and it's similar. It's the same date. So, and the pottery is one of the best ways to date a site. And yes, the Museum of the Royal Tombs at Vergina, it's superb because it's both a museum and an archaeological site together. And again, since I'm interested in military history and technology, when you see the armor, the full armor of Philip II, yeah, it's. I'm personally, I'm awestruck. I have goosebumps whenever I visit the site, and also when I guide it, because it also, you can tell a story. You can tell the story of the royal family. You can tell the story of the king. You can tell the story of how of his assassination and how Alexander buried him in all glory. And you have the items in front of you, so you can. And then you see, when you see the facade of the tomb, and it helps that, you know, it's in the dark, so it's they impose on you the awe that you walk down in the tomb, down in the netherworld in a way, and you can see an ancient Greek painting. You can see the colors there. It's thrilling.
Oh God, I remember even when we went, it was like 40 degrees outside, and the walk from the car to the tomb, you know, you were melting, and you go just deep in, and it was so cold. It chills. It was otherworldly. Now, for people who like also islands, though, I mean, it's one of the most amazing things about Greece is all these stunning, beautiful islands, and so I feel like it's really great when you can find these historic sites that are also in stunning locations. It's like the best of all the worlds. And I know you went on a trip recently with the Classical Wisdom members where you went to Chios, for instance, and everyone spoke extremely highly about Chios. But are there some other islands that are just like a perfect combination of spectacular landscape and historical wonders?
Well, I will start with, I have mentioned Naxos. I think we have talked about Naxos. Naxos, I think, is one of my favorite islands in the Cyclades because it has beautiful landscapes. First of all, it's an island where you can see greenery and running water. There are even water mills. If you take a hike, you can see water mills in Naxos. But it also has some very important archaeological sites dating to the early Bronze Age, to the classical period. For example, there is a location of an ancient quarry where there are two statues which are unfinished. So you go and you can see those big statues just lying in the middle of a field. And you can start imagining the stories of how they were striking the statues out of the marble, and somebody made a mistake or during transportation. So you can even imagine that. And then there is a sanctuary dedicated to Demeter, where it has one of the most important temples built entirely out of marble. Actually, Naxos was famous for its marble, and it is a temple that has been reconstructed. And it's surrounded by a rural landscape, so you can see sometimes how the ancient Greek cults were location specific, because the landscape interacts very well with the temple. So yes, Naxos is one of those islands. Then I would mention Santorini, because Santorini has stunning volcanic landscapes, but it also has some very interesting and impressive archaeology. We have the Bronze Age city of Akrotiri, where you can see buildings which are up to 2 stories high, and they're preserved. And if you don't mind walking, there is the Hellenistic city, which is on top of a mountain, which is also not as famous, but also very impressive. So that's from the islands that are in the Cyclades. Chios has a lot of medieval monuments. For example, the monastery of Nea Moni, built in the 11th century. It has some superb mosaics, one of the 3 most important Byzantine period monuments in Greece. And also walking in the villages where they were producing the masticha, it's an experience. It's like you walk in a different period, especially the village of Pyrgi and Anavatos, which are it's like you have walked through a portal and you're in a different time.
Oh, that's what I love, like that feeling when you just going through time. It's absolutely amazing. Now I want to pivot for a second about being good tourists and good preservers of history, because it's so wonderful to go to these sites, but it's obviously a lot of times they're very fragile, and I know having tons of tourists can destroy and harm sites. So are there some things that we can do to be respectful of these ancient sites?
Yeah, that's the thing is that there are some sites which are really busy. For example, the Acropolis that is getting thousands of people per day, and a large portion of these people just want to take a selfie. And I know that people will hate me for saying that, but I mean, a lot
Everybody
of people
knows that's true.
take a selfie.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't really care about the monument itself. So I have seen people walking over the lines because they want to take that photograph. And I can understand that's your only time on the Acropolis, but those lines are there for a reason. So as to visitors, I would say that they have to be informed about the regulations of the site. And I know sometimes that the regulations are not very well communicated, but it doesn't take a lot of time when, for example, you issue the ticket to say, okay, can I take photographs, other places where we cannot enter, and the guards will tell, because that's their job. There are archaeological sites which have designated pathways and walkways which are well marked, and you cannot deviate from them. And in those places, things are easy. But there are other sites where people can walk, and sometimes they walk over walls. They enter into areas that have sensitive floors or mosaics. So yes, a visitor has to be aware when he enters a place. And I know that, for example, or sometimes people want to have the tactile experience of touching the marble walls or the columns. And I can understand that, because for me, as an archaeologist, it's very important to have that tactile experience. But yes, if you have 16,000 people touching the same place over time, 10 years from now, you start seeing that area has been worn down. So in the end, we may admire those places, but at the same time, we contribute to their decay and destruction. And it's a pity, because eventually the authorities will be forced to take action and block access to a specific area. It has happened, actually. In Greece, there was in Corinth, there was a Roman bath, and there was the part of the latrine. The benches and the halls, it was very nice. I mean, you could sit there and you can talk about that, how people in Roman period were going to the toilet. And I know it sounds a little gross, but it's part of it. You have a connection with the everyday life of these people. But because people were going there all the time, eventually the Minister of Culture just roped it off, and you cannot go there anymore. So you cannot experience the site. You cannot look at the monument anymore because other people were not careful. So I guess people have to be aware of the regulations and always follow the directions of the guards, and of course of their guide, because that's also important. And for that to happen, I think that we should reach out and educate the general public, because if you don't appreciate the significance of these places, you won't really care about them.
That's well said. I mean, we're by existing now, we are stewards of a collective
Exactly.
history of humanity and civilization. Like, we need to take that responsibility seriously and preserve it for our future generations, and think, okay, do you want your great grandchildren to be able to see these sites? Then we have to be respectful of what we have today, you know. Now, I'd like to finish up because you've been so generous with your time, but I'm going to be very selfish and ask you about one more place, because for two reasons. One, I'm planning on spending some time there myself this summer, and we've talked about a lot of sites I've been to and did not enjoy fully. So this one, I'm going to be ahead of the game. And also because Classical Wisdom, you know, we have done tours and cruises, which you were part of the In Search of Homo one, and all of my Classical Wisdom members raved about your knowledge and passion. And
Very kind of them.
yes, they were so thoroughly impressed, Ed. So our fall trip is actually going to this place as well. So it's kind of two birds, one stone. The island of Rhodes. It's a big island. There's lots of history. But what are some of the gems that we can find on Rhodes?
In Rhodes, first of all, you should not miss the best preserved part of the medieval city of Rhodes and the fortifications. Some of the best fortification complex of its time in the Eastern Mediterranean. And the fortification complex has a lot of history because it was besieged twice by the Ottoman Turks. And then there are two archaeological sites. One is the city of Lindos, which has a sanctuary to Athena, and the other is the city of Kamiros. It's on the other part of the island. So these are three of the places that you should definitely include in your itinerary. Lindos is the most famous. I would say Kamiros not that much, but both of them are very important. And
it's called Lindos.
Lindos, Kamiros. These are the archaeological sites, and in Rhodes, in the city of Rhodes, the medieval fortifications. Actually, you can walk down in the moat, so you can see the bastions, the towers. You can, and also I think in the summer you can also walk on the parapet of the walls. And there is also the part of the Street of the Knights, which was the central area of the medieval city where the Knights of St. John had their houses, the hospital, which actually functions as the archaeological museum. Yeah, I don't know how long you're going to stay in Rhodes, because
I haven't decided, actually. I mean, I was thinking maybe a couple of weeks.
Okay. If you stay a couple of weeks, you have enough time to explore the city and also go to the other places. It's a very beautiful island. I mean, you can also explore other sites which are not necessarily historical, but they're very beautiful.
Well, that is just the splendor that is Greece. You know, you kind of get the whole package. You get these great history and culture. You get these amazing beaches and mountains, and then also the food. I mean, you guys are spoiled. You're spoiled. I'll just tell you. Now, if anybody wants to follow your work or your projects, how can they find you?
Well, I have a blog. Tells Aristotle Guide in Greece. And where actually I post make posts about history, archaeology, not necessarily a historical reenactment, whenever I have the time. And I also give online lectures now. I'm preparing one on the Persian Wars. It will be a 6-lecture course on the Persian Wars, actually. And I will make an announcement through my blog about when it's going to be held. So yeah, that's the main way that somebody can follow me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Aristotle. You've given me a whole lot of amazing places to make sure I go to.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Anya. And it was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Classical Wisdom Speaks, a podcast dedicated to bringing ancient wisdom to modern minds. Please go to classicalwisdom.substack.com to learn more about our work and to sign up for our free newsletter. And to learn more about Aristotle's work, please go to his website, aristotleguide.wordpress.com. Thank you.